Hi, it's Joe. Welcome to the Quilt Report. I've been thinking a lot lately, this last couple of weeks, ever since I was in New York teaching at Quilting by the Lake, spending time with my friend Pat Pauley, the great quilt artist from Rochester, New York, and talking to Pat about all kinds of things, art. You know, it's great to get together with your peers, art and quilts. One of the things that we talked about was the difference in our experience as a man and a woman. I explained to Pat that I think that the difference when we start making quilts is fundamentally different between men and women, in that women make their first quilt against a context of history. They're either signing up with their grandmother's tradition, or they're rebelling against it, figuratively. American women, it's their birthright to make quilts. American men, there's no context that they have to either join or fight against. So I think from the very beginning it's easier for a man to just decide to just figure it out himself and go off his own way. I think after we become experienced quilt makers and are trying to make serious art with quilts, then I think we're all in the same pot of stew. We're all trying to do the same thing. Making art, making original things is hard, and we're all trying to figure it out and find our own voice and be true to it. And Pat allowed us how that's true. All that might be true, but still she thinks that there's an advantage for me being a tall white man in the world of quilt making. It helps me stand out to be different, and I think that's probably true. There's probably it's always been easy rather for me to stand out in a group of quilt makers. I'm taller than most of them, for one thing, one thing that we talked about was this show that I was in with 7 quilt makers, 7 male quilters. I was one of the 7 male quilters that opened at the Craft and Folk Art Museum in Los Angeles a few years ago. I traveled to Asheville, North Carolina, and then to the Quilt Study Center and Museum in Lincoln, Nebraska. People rightly complained about that show. Some people did, because women wrote on blogs and stuff saying, I can only imagine the headlines if there were 7 female quilt makers featured in a show. But our show got lots of press because of the novelty factor of men making quilts. And yes, that's true. But I said, what am I supposed to do about it? Say I'm not going to do that kind of show when the Craft and Folk Art Museum in Los Angeles calls? And I've been thinking about it and thinking, oh yeah, actually that's exactly what I'm going to say. I'm going to say I'm not going to do those kind of shows anymore. All right? Not do single gender shows. I wouldn't want to be excluded from a show because I'm a man. That has actually happened in the far distant past. I mean, for me, but very rarely. But I wouldn't want that to happen. And in the same way, I don't want to exclude women from shows. I don't want to be a part of a single gender show. Not anymore. I'm just not going to do it. I've always wanted to compete on the playing field with the great quilt makers of the past, the great quilt artists of the present, the great quilt makers of the present, and artists, and the great artists that I admire. I've wanted to make a blanket that can hang on the walls of a museum, and I'm lucky. My quilts have ended up doing just that, and they're in collections. I get to travel around and get paid to talk about myself and my quilts. So I'm very privileged, like in 5 or 6 different ways. Many men are not so privileged, and I have no problem with them having their own shows, single gender shows. But I'm not going to take part in them anymore. All right? I'm declaring right now. Oh, there's a lot to talk about on this topic, and I have lots of ideas about it. Maybe we can carry on a conversation in the comments section below this video on YouTube, or email me, joe@joethequilter. We'll talk about it on Facebook. You let me know what you think. I'll see you next time. Thanks for stopping by.